This video covers creating and using permanent formats in a SAS dataset. If I run a proc print on my example 2 data, you can see that my data are coded with 1s and 2s or ET and LT, and I may want to have this information in my data set so that I know what these values represent. I have that stored somewhere else, but I want to pull them into my SAS data set so I don't have to remember for my gender variable, for example, that 0 is male and 1 is female. To do that, I can create custom formats in SAS. First, I need to assign a library reference. And then I'm going to use proc format to create my custom formats. All you need to type is proc format, and then we're going to use the option library equals to assign a permanent format folder in my round 1 folder on my computer. So it's practice.format because that's my library reference, and we end that with a semicolon. Next, we list out all of the custom formats that we want to create. These start with the word value and then the name of your custom format. I'm naming my format something similar to the actual variable so that I know which ones to assign where. So for my gender variable, I'm creating a format called gender underscore, where the 0 equals male and the 1 equals female. And notice that my value labels actually need to be in quotes. It can be single or double, it doesn't matter, just be consistent. This particular format is done, and so I end it with a semicolon. Next, I want to create a format for my arrive variable. You'll notice that this custom format starts with a $sign. This lets SAS know that this variable is a string variable and it contains characters. I also have to put those characters in quotes in addition to the labels being in quotes. I then create a yes/no variable label or a format label and a custom label for my satisfaction variable. We are going to run these. And you notice we won't get anything in the results viewer, but we'll get information in our log. And it's important to check this to make sure everything worked as it should for each of your custom formats. All of these have been written to the practice.format folder, so we can now use them. Next, we're going to apply the formats to the data. I'm going to open my permanent example 2 data set and call it example 3 in my working folder. Next, I'm going to use an options statement and tell SAS where to find the formats that I just created. So I use format search equals, and then in parentheses I list the location of those custom formats I just made, so practice.format. And I end that with a semicolon. I then have to assign the formats to each of the variables. SAS doesn't necessarily know where the formats are going to go, so I use a format statement. Format, the name of the variable, and then the custom format that's supposed to be assigned to it. In this case, I have gender. I want to assign the gender format, and I end that with a period. Next, I have last meeting, and I'm actually assigning a SAS format to this variable, and you can look these up online. I have my arrival variable, and I'm assigning my arrive format to that with a period. You'll notice here that I have 3 variables listed together and then 1 format assigned. All 3 of these variables are using the same format, so I can group those together and assign the format once rather than assign the format individually to each variable. Once I'm done with all my formats, I end with a semicolon, and then I can run this syntax. And you'll notice again, I'm not getting any information specifically about the formats. They're listed up here in the syntax in my log. But other than that, there's no information to know if they've been assigned. So we're going to check the formats by using proc print. And you can see here that instead of the coded data, I now have my formats that I created. It says yes and no, very satisfied, etc. I want to save this example 3 data set as a permanent data set so that these formats are permanently assigned to the data. And now we're going to take a look at recalling these data sets after we've already assigned permanent formats to it. So we're going to open our file back up. And we want to open our new data set that has the formats assigned. Notice that if we just use the regular data and set steps, we get these errors because SAS can't find the formats that are permanently assigned to this data set. So we need to tell the program where those formats are saved. And we use the same thing that we did when we assigned the formats, the options statement. If we run it this time, we have no issues, 20 observations read in, and we're using work.example3 with 20 observations and 8 variables. Again, there's no information about the formats, but we can check it by looking at proc prints or proc contents. And you'll notice in the results viewer, for proc print, I have my value labels used. And down here in my proc contents, you can see in the format column, I actually have the custom formats that I made with those names. I want to now save this file in a new folder so I can show you what happens when your formats are not in the same folder as your data set. So we're going to close out SAS again and open it back up. We're going to run our library reference, call it test run, and we want to open example 4 data set that we had saved, and we're using the options format search so SAS knows where to look. But we get errors again because SAS is looking in the library reference, which is round 2 folder, for the formats, and they're not there. If we go into our round 2 folder, you can see there's no format folder in here. So what we can do is simply take this folder and copy it into our round 2 folder, and then run the code again. This time, no errors. And we'll do a proc print just to check. And you can see that there's no issue. The formats are being used. Now, if you ever get a data set where there are permanent formats assigned, but you don't have the format folder, you have 2 options. The first is to tell SAS to ignore the format error. And you do that by simply adding a little bit of code. Instead of options and then saying format and looking for the format folder, you simply put options and then no format error. And this tells SAS to ignore the format error so that you can use the data set. Your other option is to delete the formats from the data set. And that's involved by just putting a little bit of code that says format underscore all underscore. And this will delete the formats from the data set. So let's take a look at deleting the formats. We check our log. We don't have any issues. If we run a proc print just to check, we can see that we now have no formats for our data.